Okay, we're almost there. Last thing I need to talk about is using significant digits in calculations. So your first lab is going to be based on density. Density is mass over volume. You're going to have to do calculations with these measurements. You're probably almost always going to have to do calculations with your measurements. So it's important that you know how to use significant digits when you're doing math with them. Okay, so one thing to remember and how we determine the rules for this is you can only be as precise as your least precise measurement. So what that means is you're only as good as your worst measurement. You can't claim that you know to 7 significant digits what the answer to a problem is if your scale only gives you 1 decimal place. So it says you have like 2.2 grams. I can't claim to know all of these digits exactly if my scale isn't very good. Okay, so if you are rounding incorrectly and giving me a bunch of significant digits, you're actually lying to me about how good your data is. Okay, so you do need to be careful with this. You need to round correctly. So what are the rules for rounding when we do math with measurements? Okay, pretty easy. Multiplication and division. You need to round your final answer to the least number of sig figs. You'll hear me abbreviate significant figures as sig figs. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to look at the numbers in the problem that I give you. Whichever one has the least number of significant figures, that's the same amount of significant figures that your answer should have. Okay, same thing in the lab. If you're making measurements, your final answer, if I asked you to find the density of something, it should have the same number of significant figures as your measurement that had the least significant figures, the one that was the worst. Okay, now addition and subtraction is a little bit different because of how that works. You should round your final answer to the least number of decimal places, okay, meaning numbers after the decimal. So again, you look at the numbers in the problem or the measurements that you made in lab, you do your math, and then if it's addition and subtraction, you round to whatever your least number of decimal places was. Okay, now rounding works the way you have always learned how to round. If the next digit is 5 or bigger, you round up. If the next digit is 4 or lower, you keep the number the same. So if I said round this number to 2 significant figures, okay, if I said round 5.37 to 2 significant figures, you want to look at the second significant figure. That's where you're supposed to round. It's 3. Okay, and the number after it is a 7. Well, that should round to 5.4 then. So the number 5.37, if I want to round it to 2 sig figs, is 5.4. Okay, 5.34, okay, rounds to 5.3, right? The number after the 3 is 4 or lower. So I'm going to keep it the same number. It rounds to 5.3. 5.35, okay, the number after my second significant digit is a 5. I would round it up. So this rounds to 5.4. And if I gave you this number, 5.349, and I said round it, again, I want you to look at the number just directly next to the one you're trying to round. After the 3 comes a 4. So it does not round up. It's just 5.3. Okay, so regular rounding rules. Now, don't think too much into this. If I say round to 2 significant figures, well, just find the second significant figure. What that really means in this first case, 5.37, is that I want you to round to the nearest 10th. It's like saying, please round this number to the nearest 10th. Okay, it's like saying, I gave you 5.349, please round this number to the nearest 10th. Okay, so find the second sig fig and round there. All right, now what if you had a series of calculations? So I had to multiply this and then divide this and then multiply this and divide this. Don't round to the very end. Okay, this is another reason that you should have a scientific calculator. Keep all of your numbers. Don't round to the end. Okay. Okay, and the other rule is if you have mixed calculations, like you have some addition and subtraction and multiplication and division, you have to kind of use your rules for each operation. Okay, so be careful when you're doing these. Okay. So I have some examples here. I want you to try to round these. Now I already did the math for you. I know you can use your calculator, fine. But I did this and I want you to round it correctly. So try these and then check your answers. Okay, I have all of the answers for these written right here. So check your answers. There's a couple that I want to point out, and those are part C. here. When you multiply these, your calculator gives you 0.059964. Again, I don't want all your calculator numbers. I want you to round to the correct number of significant figures. Well, this answer should have two significant figures because this number here, 0.0057, only has two significant digits. Okay, so I would be like, okay, I want to round to two sig figs. Well, where's my second sig fig? Well, it's the 9 here. It's got a 9 after it, so it would round up. So this would actually be 0.060. Now this does have two significant figures in it, right? The 6 and the 0 both count. Okay. This one, 69.72 minus 67.92 gives me 1.8. That's what my calculator says. However, it's not the right number of significant digits. When I do subtraction, I need to round to that says the least number of decimal places. Well, both of these numbers have two decimal places. So my answer should have two decimal places. So you might have to add a 0. Okay. Now rounding big numbers can be a little tricky. Don't overthink it. Okay. This number and this number here in part E, 0.23 only has two significant digits. So my answer should have two significant digits. Okay. So I got this number in my calculator. This 2152.17 blah, 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 blah. And I only want to round to two significant digits. Well, that means I want to round to this number 1 right here. Now it's got a 5 after it, so it's going to round up to a 2. However, this number does not just round to 22. Okay, 2,152 does not round to 22. It does round to 2,200. So you can put those zeros there as placeholder zeros. Now this answer has two significant digits, and that is how you would round it. Okay, now these mixed ones are a little bit more difficult. So what I did here is what you need to do is the subtraction first, right? Order of operations in my parentheses first. So once I do the subtraction, my answer there should have had 3 decimal places due to subtraction. Okay, so 3 decimal places. And if I did this math, that number actually only had 3 significant digits. So then I do my multiplication and I go by significant digits, and it should have 3 significant figures. So that's why I reported 2.50. Okay, this one here, again, I did my addition first. That should have only had 1 decimal place because both of those numbers only have 1 decimal place. And this number, when I added these together, actually had 4 significant figures when I did the math, and I rounded to 1 decimal place. And so that had 4, and 180.5 also has 4 sig figs. So my answer should have 4 sig figs. Okay, and finally, I subtracted these two first. It should have only had 1 decimal place because 4.5 only has 1 decimal place. So that number had 3 significant digits, and I divided it by a number that had 4. So my final answer should only have 3 significant digits. Okay, so you do need to watch in your series of calculations that you do find your correct significant digit, but again, don't round until the end. So keep those numbers in your calculator. You just do have to know where to round. So be careful with those. And if you need more practice, let me know I have it. Oh, that's where we're ending for today. If you have questions, please come to office hours or send me an email. I will be happy to help you.